but is when I went to get a PCR test. So we had somebody caring for our daughter that tested positive for coronavirus. Not very sick at all. She always wears a mask when she's caring for our daughter. And so, boom. Now we are on quarantine because not that we were in contact with her, but that our daughter was, and we'd be holding our daughter. Right. So now you've got to all right, well, what's the thing that we can do here? So we let's go get tested. So we wait 4 days and then we go get tested. And when I show up at this clinic, which is the only one that I can get in to get the day of thing. Yeah. It is like going to the TSA. They have us wait in our car for 2 hours. We come in, it's a bunch of people standing around, and I know they're nurses. The woman that comes to do my readings isn't even wearing gloves. She just comes in and puts a cuff around me, and there's no way she's actually looking at the dial. I mean, she's just kind of, and then they come in to actually do the test, and they tell me nothing about what's going on because they must be doing an ungodly amount of these, and jam it all the way up my nose. And I was just so shocked at the way this goes. It's dirty in there. Stuff wasn't picked up. And you think, I can go get healthcare anywhere I want. So if this is where I could get to, then where is the rest of the country going to get healthcare? And it's got to be worse than this. And that is a scary, scary thought.
Was anyone there? Maybe you weren't asking these hard questions. I do it because I'm in the PCR space. But when I've been to a few of these things, and I ask well, what's the false positive rate of the test?
I asked, man, because I had just been. That's why when you were tweeting about this, I was like, wait, what? Tell me about the test, and I went in there and I actually asked them, and then we'll get into your answers on this. So I said, what did the number of tests that come back positive that shouldn't be? And the woman was like, I don't know, it's not very many. It's really, really good test. Yeah. And then I was like, what's the process for you doing this? How does this test get done? They come and pick up the vials every couple hours, and then we'll let you know sometime in the future. And she just had no concept. And the fact that it was so dirty is there, that it led me to believe it'd be hard to get reasonable tests.
Yeah. Same experience here. And in our case, the rapid test was $140, and I think the PCR test was $320 or something. So the price of these tests is ridiculous at the moment. PCR tests should be maybe $10 to $50, right? But they're all elevated because they've created this artificial demand, this regulatory demand that doesn't necessarily need to be there. So that's one issue. And no one there knew the false negative rate, the false positive. Didn't even know the name of the test they were running. And I even tried to ask a very simple question, what's the percent positivity? How many of these things are lighting up per day? Just to get us, is it 1%? Is it 10%? What? No clue. So I left very disheartened with it. That's really what kind of made me dig more into this, because I was like, this is what PCRs turn into. Is it's I get better medical information out of people at a dispensary than I get from people that are shoving stuff up my nose.
So to explain to people what the PCR test is supposed to be doing and kind of what's going on with the test people are using right now.
So it's supposed to be measuring. Well, it depends on who you ask what it's supposed to do. I can tell you what it does. What it measures is if you have any RNA molecules that are related to the virus in your system. And it's pretty good at that, actually. It can pick up very small numbers. But that thing that they jam up your nose is not very good at sampling. There have been studies showing anywhere between 1,000 to 10,000-fold variance in the amount of human DNA that comes on that swab. Regardless of whether they pick up the virus, some of these tests will look for a human gene just to prove the test works, which is a good idea. If you can't see the human gene, you missed the nose, right? So, but even those signals vary quite a bit, and so that tells you that the sampling is really roughshod and probably not very accurate. And then it's looking for virus RNA, though. It's not looking for active virus, and that's a big problem because the time frame for which your qPCR positive can be outwards to 50 days. There's some papers that show it out to 77 days, but the time window where you're infectious is around 7 days. So, you could have a scenario where it's a 10-to-1 ratio of people who are not infectious that are getting quarantined versus those that are infectious. So it's horrible at discerning whether you're infectious or not.
And then this cascading effects of telling people that they have a positive test when they don't have a positive test. Yep. It's a cascade. And once you get involved in it, it's so that's why we limit how many people we see now, just because if we get a
hit,
incorrect one, you're done. You're out.
Yeah. It's very true. And everyone writes that off as no big deal. You're getting quarantined. You're not dying. Suck it up. But that has an impact on how many nurses are in the hospitals because their kids go positive and then they got to stay home. And it has an impact.
Yeah, my wife is a physical therapist. She can't treat people if she's positive or even is in the cascade of somebody being positive.
Yes, exactly. And so I don't think people appreciate the 6 degrees to Kevin Bacon that everyone's in. You are probably 3 degrees from someone who's positive. And so that means all of society is stalled because the test is overly sensitive. Now, some of that, we've written actually a retraction request for some of these methods. One in particular, which is the first one that the WHO put on their website, and I can point people to that retraction review. That doesn't mean we're saying all PCR is bad, but one test in particular that got launched really early is very bad. And does create a lot of false negatives and false positives. And it's really what set the seed for running this test with your blinders on. The challenge with this test is people are turning it into a yes/no answer, and that's really not helpful. You really want to know your viral load, and you want to know the value that comes out of the test. Otherwise, because you want to know, do I have a little bit of virus? And because if I don't have symptoms and a little bit of virus, I'm probably not infectious. And I'm not going to worry about this. Maybe I'll get tested again in 2 days. And if the viral load goes down, I know I'm on the back end of the disease, not the front end of the disease, right? There's a lot that you could do to minimize the impact on society if you know what that CT level is, or there's a CQ or CT score on these things. Those two terms are interchangeable in the PCR field. And that just measures, it's a log scale. It measures how much virus you have. So if you don't utilize that log scale, it's literally like you crying, yelling fire inside of a movie theater every time you feel the Richter scale move, and it's a log scale, and we're hiding that information. But if you were to do that, if you were to, yell panic every time the Richter scale moves without telling people it's like, a scale, an earthquake that's a 2 versus a 7, you're going to have massive chaos in society. And that's what they're doing with this test is they're not telling you what it is. And they're taking this overly cautious approach of quarantining people that are asymptomatic and aren't infectious. I think it violates a lot of medical ethics. We couldn't get away with this in 2019. You're just not supposed to be doing medical tests on asymptomatic people without informed consent. And it's pretty clear nobody's informed. But not even the physicians or the nurses that are administering these tests know what the CT value is. They don't even know the name of the test or the false positive or false negative rates. So the informed nature of the test isn't there, and the consent isn't there. No one's taking these things consensually. I mean, I shouldn't say no one, but few people are taking them consensually. They're forced to take them to get back to school. They're forced to take them to get back into the workforce. They're forced to
school stuff. I mean, there are people going in weekly to get tests for coronavirus. How can a
$1 billion
university
business now?
I'm fine if you're sick or maybe it's if you did come in contact with somebody that had a really bad case, there may be some level where it's like, hey, you've got to go get tested to find out what's going on.
I think symptoms make sense. Yeah, if you got symptoms, you take care of this. That's a really good sign. The asymptomatic spread stuff is really falling apart. That was sent around and quite popular in the spring. A lot of the papers came out of China.
That was the terrifying part because that made everybody that made every single person you encountered, whether they were sick or not, dangerous. They might as well have had leprosy.
Absolutely. And that was, I think, the key for them to get control over society is to send out and amplify that message that it doesn't matter if you have symptoms. Everyone needs to be afraid of everybody else. And we all need to panic a little bit harder. But, the papers that are coming out now, I think the most recent one in JAMA showed 0.7% asymptomatic spread in indoor environments. So the worst possible condition where everyone's locked inside, the asymptomatic spread was barely noticeable above background. And I think it was something like 25% if you're symptomatic. So the asymptomatic story is really crumbling. And that really points and underscores why these PCR tests can be so damaging. They're the right tool in the hospital, and the doctors need these tests. There's no doubt that doctors like these tests, but I think they're all a little frustrated that people are taking an RNA score that comes off this test without any information on symptoms or any other clinical management, any understanding of prior disease, of the patient's background, and declaring you a quarantine subject, not even knowing if you're infectious. They could not get away with that in 2019, and I think they're all kind of shocked that it's happening now. that this level of testing is happening even on children that don't really have the capacity to perform informed consent. It's really gone way overboard. And the reason I brought up the regulatory stuff before is that when these industries get this big, they're hard to stop. I mean, Thermo did $2 billion in testing last quarter. They're growing 40% a quarter. Quest did $1 billion. LabCorp did $1 billion. Right? Those are just three I know at the top of my head. This is a multi-billion-dollar quarterly industry that's not going to stop anytime soon. Given they're selling these now to every high school and every even elementary school that, hey, you have to test all your kids every week. And the schools don't know any better, other than if we don't do this, we might be liable. So they all sign up for it. And this is kind of absurd because the kids are 1,000-fold less likely to ever get symptoms. And they're not known to transmit it very well. So it's like they've gone after the part of the population that can't vote, and force them all to take these tests that aren't necessarily. And it's a big boondoggle. Maybe it appeases the teacher unions. I don't know, but the teachers are the ones that should be getting tested. They're the ones that are more at risk of this disease actually harming them and spreading it. But we see all the focus on the children. It's really. I don't get it. It's really bizarre.
Thanks for checking out this podcast short. If you like this interview, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button and hit that bell so you always get notified about this podcast. And if you're really interested in conversations like this, you may want to consider joining the Articulate Ventures Network. To find out more, go to network.articulate.ventures.